Story 1. I feel that if we had more than two political parties, we could potentially break out of the increasing pendulum swing of political reactions. Story 2. No, be realistic. Parties are going to happen because people will group together. The difference is having an election system that isn't winner takes all. It allows for a greater variety of opinions and helps prevent extreme left or right ideologies from gaining power. Story 3. I appreciate the sentiment, but I cannot see it working without a significant shift, something more disruptive than what we are currently experiencing. Third parties get absorbed into one of the two major parties or are rendered ineffective. If there were no parties, they would inevitably evolve back into two. The concept of us versus them is a powerful force that is inextricable from human nature. Story 4. I made 2 AskReddit posts yesterday involving something practical and non-political. They were immediately removed. However, these same repetitive questions worded differently are allowed. It seems like this system is compromised. Story 5. The concept of no labels is meaningless. I am a Democrat because I believe in the policies of the Democratic Party. In fact, I often think the official policies are far too moderate. Removing party names does not change the beliefs that people hold. Individuals maintain their views regardless of how they are labeled. If you put me and a Republican in a room, told us we could no longer affiliate with political parties, and expected us to suddenly agree on everything, that is unrealistic. Story 6. I don't believe it's possible to have no political party. The reason the United States has a two-party system is that our method of determining outcomes, majoritarian voting, ensures there will always be a victorious majority opinion, with everyone else holding a differing view. This naturally leads to various opposition groups coalescing around the common goal of working together long enough to remove the policy they all disagree with. This phenomenon also occurs in multi-party systems, but it's easier to form shifting alliances so that the majority coalition isn't always composed of the same individuals with a singular goal keeping them cooperative until it is achieved. I also believe that to have no party implies that everyone is on the same team, and to have everyone on the same team means there is effectively one party. There is still at least one party. However, a single unopposed party can lead to situations like those seen in China and Russia. It is crucial to allow space for dissent, and if our culture vilifies those who divide the house, then those who best embody flattering caricatures of our culture will gain power. That is simply demagoguery. Story 7. Can we have an Ask America subreddit at this point? On one hand, it's Americans. How do you feel about the recent event or decision? On the other hand, it's Americans. Why aren't you revolting? Or Americans, why aren't you doing anything? I don't know if people are concerned or judgmental. I'm getting whiplash here. The top answer almost always seems to point to exhaustion, distress, and overwhelm. It's not going to magically improve from one day to the next. Do we really need these inquiries every day? Story 8. There is nothing wrong with parties. People disagree on various topics. It is natural for them to want to associate with those who share their views. Nebraska technically elects representatives on a nonpartisan basis, but the state has a Republican majority and a Republican majority legislature. Party affiliation also saves people a lot of time. I support Democrats because I support abortion rights and LGBTQ individuals. I do not need to research every single candidate when I vote, as I know that Democrats generally align with my views on most issues. Voters often blame politicians, but in reality, it is the voters who bear the responsibility. Voters ultimately receive what they desire. Story 9. Why are all these questions US-centric and always about current events? Shouldn't this belong in a political forum or something? Story 10. Washington's farewell address explicitly warned against political parties, and he was completely correct in his assessment. While I do not agree with most viewpoints that suggest equal shortcomings on both sides, it is clear that neither side is interested in meaningful electoral reform. I wish the Democratic Party understood that the duopoly is essentially a Republican monopoly with a controlled opposition. The two-party system is detrimental to everyone except those in power. Story 11. There is nothing I dread more than a division of the Republic into two major parties, each under its leader and coordinating measures in opposition to one another. In my humble opinion, this should be regarded as the greatest political evil under our Constitution. John Adams, The Works of John Adams, Second President of the United States. Story 12. It is impossible, in my humble opinion. There will always be parties because there will always be groups with shared interests and goals. As much as we complain about it, there will probably always be two parties, or at least two major parties. The world may not be binary, but human thinking often is. We are wired to see things as either slash or, and we tend to coalesce into two groups over almost any issue. Even in countries with multiple parties, there are usually only two significant ones, while the rest are smaller specialty parties that focus on a narrower range of issues. However, they almost always align with the general worldview of one or the other of the two largest parties, either right-leaning or left-leaning. Story 13. That is not how politics and humanity operate. Even in single-party states, there are factions within the party. Story 14. You would still have political parties in practice. It would all just be done behind the scenes, as it were, in an unofficial way. Similarly minded people would still try to ally for a common cause. Story 15. Not practical as long as political divisions exist. Everyone wants unity as long as it is their unity. This is how the party system emerged in the first place. Federalists and Democratic Republicans both believed they were the ones who wanted unity, but they felt the need to make temporary partisan decisions to keep the obvious bad actors out of office. Story 16. Aren't you all about to get only one party, the billionaire party? Or hasn't that already happened? Story 17. One party will divide. I believe the actual solution is to increase the number of parties. This approach will reduce the power of any single party and allow more people to vote in a way that meaningfully represents their interests, rather than constantly having to choose the lesser of two evils. Story 18. Well, there are a few issues here. I don't think Lincoln was arguing against partisan politics, as he was a product of partisan politics. The House divided against itself represented the country. The United States has been divided since its founding. The only time the United States really comes together is in response to an external threat. Much of the history that United States citizens learn in school was written in the aftermath of World War II and during the Cold War. The Civil Rights Act and Nixon's Southern strategy further divided the country. The Constitution still grants one person, and therefore one party, significant power within the executive branch. Even if Congress had 4 or 5 political parties and a coalition majority to name a Speaker of the House and Majority Leader in the Senate, it would still create a strong tendency towards partisan politics, allowing voters to ensure that their side is represented in the executive. Ranked choice voting is not going to solve this issue. It requires a constitutional overhaul not just at the federal level, but for every state constitution as well. Story 19. We should have freed all the slaves, won the Civil War, and then expelled the Confederacy from the United States. Like Tom Hardy in The Bike Riders. I just wanted you to know it was my idea. Story 20. Before we even go down this thought experiment, understand that it is impossible within our current system. People who do not understand our system seem to think that the political parties are responsible for the world we have right now, but they are not. The world, as we see it, is the direct result of over half the population not participating in the system. I understand that it is a broken system, but currently we are absolutely powerless to change it. It is a first-past-the-post, winner-takes-all, non-proportional allotment of power. This means the first group with the biggest majority wins. If you start splitting up everyone, you will only be left with the 35% that will always march in lockstep together, which already exists as Trump's base. Fracturing the remaining 65% only ensures that the Republicans can win supermajorities with their 35% to 40% turnout. If you want to change our system, get involved in the Democratic Party, vote in its primaries, and vote in the general election. Do not pretend that this is someone else's responsibility or that you can hold off and wait for the perfect candidate. Story 21. I feel that the idea is appealing in theory, but human beings tend to group themselves by certain predefined traits, making it unlikely to have a single political party. Not everyone is on the same page or wants to be. Even if citizens were indoctrinated into becoming fervent nationalists to reach a consensus, that would still bring its own issues to resolve. Therefore, I do not believe it is possible for America or most other countries to have a single political party. Story 22. There are states without political parties or with only one party for everyone to participate in. These are known as totalitarian states or dictatorships. Story 23. Can't believe that you quoted the president who has the distinction of killing more Americans than any other person. Besides the 600,000 to 700,000 who died in the war, an estimated 500,000 to 1 million newly freed slaves died from federal incompetence, including hunger and epidemics. Story 24. We have a cult, so there cannot be unity until the cult is no more. I think a better option would be to have more political parties. This would allow for greater representation. Having only one political party is not a good approach, in my opinion. I do not see any logic behind it. Times have changed since that statement. Story 25. I'm 34, and I've never felt like I belong to either political party. They both seem like individuals arguing about issues that don't matter, such as abortion and LGBTQ+ rights. While we've been debating these topics, real problems have been piling up for decades and are completely ignored. Story 26. This is one of my biggest political concerns. Occasionally, someone who lacks knowledge about politics beyond the fact that George Washington warned against political parties, despite acting as a de facto Federalist during his presidency, claims that we shouldn't have any parties at all. In a democracy, people who share similar views will naturally group together. They may not agree on every issue, but they find enough common ground to organize in an attempt to form a majority. There is no way to avoid this. You cannot create a law that prohibits like-minded individuals from organizing and still call yourself a democracy. That being said, I would prefer a system where having multiple niche parties and coalitions is more feasible. A parliamentary system or ranked choice voting would help achieve that. Story 27. The two-party system is corrupt. I do not know the solution, but I know it is a problem that we need to solve. The two-party system needs to go. Both sides are corrupt. Story 28. Irrelevant wishful thinking is present without an effective mechanism. Personally, I favor ranked choice voting. However, if passing such a significant amendment were possible, it would not be necessary. Story 29. We need political parties because it is too complicated to vote for individuals. The United States could benefit from another party or a refresh of both existing parties. Story 30. I think highly of it. More people should participate. More parties would encourage Congress to form coalitions like those seen in other countries, compelling our representatives to collaborate for us instead of against us. Until 2023, I was a non-affiliated voter. I joined the Republican Party in 2023 to vote against Trump in the primaries. That did not yield the desired outcome. Story 31. We are too often influenced by quotes from historical figures who held outdated views. You tell me what I think. Story 32. That quote has nothing to do with party affiliation. It means that a team of people must all be pulling toward the same goal. Individuals from different parties can strive for the same objectives, and people within one party can have different goals. Story 33. I think that us versus them style thinking is human nature, and you're not going to get away from it anytime soon. There is no cure for human behavior. You just have to find ways to work with or around the imperfections of humans. I don't see any scheme getting rid of polarization and the us versus them mentality, with people playing politics as if it were sports teams. Mass media having fewer regulations than ever will only exacerbate the situation, and I don't see significant numbers of people calling for mass media reform and internet media standards. Consequently, you're likely to continue experiencing mass brainwashing and polarization. Story 34. Both parties have been taken over by the extreme right and extreme left. I want a third party that is moderate. I believe they could attract enough supporters from both sides to become a strong political force. Story 35. You officially have parties, or you can effectively have parties, but don't be naive enough to think we can simply ban political parties and hold hands and sing together. It's similar to when extreme libertarians advocate for the absence of a government. You're going to have a government one way or another. Story 36. It sounds nice in theory, like the dream of every group project, Let's all just agree to get along for once. But realistically, wouldn't it just lead to countless factions rather than two large ones? Then you have people passionately debating the correct orientation of toilet paper over is superior, by the way. Humans love their tribes too much for no party politics to work without things splintering into chaos. We would probably end up with even more distinct groups trying to push their niche agendas. It's a fun thought experiment, though. Story 37. I have previously suggested that we should eliminate the concept of party labels, but the idea did not gain much support. I genuinely believe it would be beneficial to prohibit any mention of party affiliation. Government officials should be evaluated exclusively based on their platforms and merits rather than the color of their ties. This change would compel politicians to be more transparent and vocal about their ideals, making it easier for people to know who they are voting for. It would also diminish the harm caused by individuals who campaign on one party affiliation and then change their stance once they attain power. Story 38. It will never work. Larger groups working together have more power. The best people can do is support a third party in hopes of that party pushing other parties out. Story 39. I dislike the two-party system. They are no longer parties. They resemble cults or religious groups, with each side claiming the other is evil while believing they are the good ones with all the solutions to societal issues, all the while lining their own pockets. We need to dismantle this two-party system completely if the United States is to get back on track. Story 40. Third parties in the United States need to focus only on local, state, and congressional seats if they want to be viable. There is no chance of any third party making an impact on presidential elections. The best way to influence policy and legislation is to be part of the process that creates it. If a party like the Greens wants to have a meaningful impact, they should stop running Jill Stein or any candidate for president and start allocating resources to other areas. Story 41. I agree there should be no party system. Unfortunately, it is a free country, and individuals with similar ideologies tend to group together for their greater good or power. I believe the Founding Fathers probably thought that everyone running for office would stand on their own beliefs and values, which they presented to the people when campaigning for election, rather than relying on a party platform. I believe that the Founding Fathers did not see politics as a career since most had other jobs and professions. This is why we don't have term limits for Congress. That was something they did not foresee. We eventually established term limits for presidents, which is a good thing. Term limits are needed in Congress to encourage new blood and limit the long-term influence of individuals who stay in office indefinitely. Generally speaking, I think our Founding Fathers did a good job preventing power from becoming too concentrated in one party or one individual for too long. They did the best they could. I do not want a one-party system. I appreciate that government inefficiency in Congress is intentional so that no single party can dominate for too long. It may not be pretty or desirable, but at least things change every 2 to 4 years, so no one is all-powerful. Many people do not like Donald Trump, and many did not like Joe Biden either, but the system works. Neither will be in power forever as our founders intended. They were concerned about kings, despots, and the concentration of power in one person's hands. Checks and balances work. Congress, the courts, and the presidency. Story 42. Parties are not the issue. The fact that two major parties hold the overwhelming majority at every level and actively collaborate to prevent the rise of any other party is the issue. Gary Johnson received 4,489,341 votes, accounting for 3.29% of the overall vote in 2016 for the Libertarian Party. Despite this significant support, the Libertarian Party was not invited to the 2020 presidential debates and was not guaranteed a spot on all 51 ballots. The Green Party faces similar challenges. Ballot access is the primary reason we lack more choices, as in some areas, there is no one running. Additionally, we contend with the issue of wasted votes. There is a prevailing mentality that if you do not vote for one of the two major parties, you are wasting your vote or are in some way responsible for an unfavorable election outcome by not supporting the losing candidate. I no longer vote for the Libertarian Party and discontinued my membership for political reasons. However, the challenges we face will not be resolved until ballot access is improved, more candidates are invited to the presidential debates, And we stop shaming individuals for voting for candidates like Gary Johnson and Jill Stein instead of Hillary Clinton, Mitt Romney, or Kamala Harris. Story 43. A house divided against itself cannot stand. I believe this government cannot endure permanently half slave and half free. I do not expect the union to be dissolved. I do not expect the house to fall, but I do expect it will cease to be divided. It will become all one thing or all the other. That's the essence of the message. Adding more parties won't fix the situation. It will only complicate matters further. In the end, we will choose to be all one thing or the other. Story 44. I think the reality is that as long as we have single-member district representation in the form of 2 senators per state and a representative per district, the two-party system is bound to remain. If the House were a proportional representation of parties, then people might feel like a third party has a chance. But right now, it's all or nothing according to the game theory. The only times we see party realignments in United States history are really around a wholesale value retrenchment in the electorate, normally brought on by intense external factors such as the New Deal coalition. The most recent realignment started with the Southern Strategy, continued with the 1994 Republican Revolution, and in my opinion was truly galvanized by September 11th. I don't think Trump is a realigning force in himself, but rather a product of the realignment. Story 45. That's how it's supposed to work. The representatives are meant to vote with or against each other to represent the country, and the different branches should keep each other in check. As soon as parties vote in lockstep, everything falls apart, as we can clearly see happening. Story 46. Political parties are, at their core, groups of like-minded individuals choosing to work together. Not having a party is not feasible because if we abolish them, they would simply reform as like-minded people continue to collaborate. We would be better served by implementing a structure where more than 2 parties can actually thrive. Story 47. A party serves no purpose. All federal and military personnel do not serve in political capacities. They serve the country. Political parties stand in the way. Story 48. If we didn't have political parties, it would be easier for billionaires to buy seats at every level of government due to campaign spending. Political parties level the playing field to some extent by providing funding for important elections with candidates who share similar ideals. Story 49. None of them are going to save anyone. They are all in it together for themselves. They always have been. It's the American dream to be successful at someone else's expense. Story 50. People will come together based on ideology. There is strength in numbers, especially in a winner-takes-all governmental system. Story 51. I would prefer 6 parties or for us to split as a nation into 6 smaller nations based on regions, such as New England, the Midwest, and the South. A Republican from Boston wants very different things than a Republican from Alabama. Someone in California should not be telling Alaskans how to live and vice versa. All the welfare states can manage their own regions and vote according to their interests. They should not be affecting the states supplying them with funds for subsidies, as they advocate for their taxes to be used within their states for healthcare, education, better mental health care, a modern government, and less oppressive law enforcement. Story 52. I don't, and as a consequence, I hear it from both sides. Closer to me, I get it to the right because that is where much of my family resides. Such is life. Story 53. I have always suggested that we run large mixed-bag primaries with no party affiliation allowed. Do not discuss your donors or your party. They do not matter. Focus on your policies and let the people decide who they prefer among the 12 candidates and what you advocate. I also believe the 5% vote minimum threshold to receive future federal campaign funding is intended to undermine additional party support at its roots. Candidates can run, but if they cannot meet 5% of the population, it becomes an uphill battle against the wealthy interests in the background that they must personally finance. Story 54. Answer. Ranked choice voting. Parties will form, and people with similar ideas will support each other. Our voting system forces us to become polarized into 2 major parties. Ranked choice voting will address this issue. Story 55. The only solution to our current predicament is to eradicate "Make America Great Again" from our cultural and political lexicon. To dash "Make America Great Again" the brainwashed masses, just as we denazified post-war Germany and de-Stalinized post-Stalin Russia. Story 56. Sounds like totalitarianism. Why not take the European approach and have many parties? For example, here in Finland, we have 25 currently registered parties, 9 of which have representatives in our parliament. Story 57. I have considered the idea that Congress and the Senate should have parties, but the president should not represent either party while running for office. Story 58. The First Amendment guarantees the people the right to associate with whom they choose. I am not sure how you are going to stop parties from forming. The Constitution emphasizes the importance of this right, so much so that it was written down as an unchangeable right. Story 59. In theory, it sounds wonderful. George Washington accurately warned against it in his exit speech from the White House. However, since most places in the United States have first past the post voting, inevitably political parties would emerge. Story 60. You mean each politician should vote independently on every single issue instead of following party lines? I don't think the system could handle that. Story 61. We need small groups to form coalitions. 2 parties cannot achieve it alone. By bringing together the center-left and center-right, we can accomplish much more. Today, we often cater to the loudest and most extreme voices. Story 62. Parties are an emergent property of representative democracy. If you want to eliminate them, you are demanding some form of oppressive totalitarian system. Simply put, people who work together on legislation will generally associate with each other and support each other's campaigns. You cannot prevent that activity without severely curtailing the civil liberties of your elected officials. It is noteworthy that a 2-party system is the Nash equilibrium within simple representative democracy. Furthermore, it is mathematically impossible to create an electoral system with the following properties. A Nash equilibrium of more than 2 parties. The consensus candidate wins. There are no key constituencies, which electoral theory describes as a dictator, someone whose opinion becomes the most important. A clear and easy algorithm to determine a winner. You can achieve 3 of those conditions. You can either accept the existence of key constituencies or employ a convoluted process for determining a winner. The first option involves any type of ranked choice or instant runoff system, which will create core constituencies whose opinions hold more weight than others. The second option refers to an approval voting system, where all candidates are rated by voters independently, necessitating weighted approval metrics and more complex rules regarding ballot spoilage. Story 63. I do not identify as either a Democrat or a Republican because neither truly represents my beliefs. The Republicans have gone off the deep end. This is no longer politics. We have reached the end game. Democrats appear to be the good guys only because Republicans have monopolized the role of the bad guys. They engage in actions outside of that narrative to gain votes. They do not genuinely care, although some representatives may, but in general, career politicians are adaptable. However, taking actions that suggest they care helps them secure votes. Money in politics renders the situation a pointless game. We will never achieve the real changes we need in our system or our country because those who truly control the country, the ones who financially support politicians, do not want change. In summary, we are in a dire situation regardless, but at least the Democrats are the lesser of 2 poor options at this point. Story 64. There is nothing wrong with the party system. However, there is something wrong with the us versus them mentality. Story 65. This is what the founders wanted. No parties. Unfortunately, most Americans do not engage with information about their politicians, so they rely on teams to vote for. Story 66. There will always be groups that band together for a common cause. Having no political parties is simply unrealistic. Having 2 parties has proven to be a disaster, as we have seen many times. We need the following improvements. 1. Representative democracy. The United States population is more than 3 times what it was when Congress was set at 435 members. There should be no more than 250,000 people per Congress member. Eliminate gerrymandering. In Michigan, 2/3 of the population were Democrats, but the Republicans controlled the legislature entirely because of gerrymandering. Once it was ended, the legislature became representative of the population. Every state should follow this example. Ranked choice voting, end the two-party system, eliminate the electoral college method of choosing the president. If it weren't for the electoral college, the two worst presidents of my lifetime, George W. Bush and Donald Trump, would never have taken office. The damage the electoral college has inflicted on the country in this century is hard to overestimate. Story 67. We need to escape this prison of a two-party system. We should consider a coalition government, ranked choice voting, and the elimination of political donations. Story 68. I prefer to have multiple options. No party means no way for people without funds to access national opportunities. Story 69. I believe we should have nationally ranked choice voting to break up partisan strangleholds and decrease polarization. If safe seats need to moderate in order to win more than just the primary, I think we would all be better off. To be fair, globally speaking, Democrats are relatively moderate while Republicans have moved significantly to the extreme. Story 70. That quote originally comes from the Bible, not Abraham Lincoln. It essentially states that if Satan could possess people and cause illness, then he could also free people from possession and perform acts of healing. The statement was not about a two-party electorate. It was about evil desires that only beget more evil. If partisan politics play out that way, it is merely coincidental. If a party is evil, it should be cast out, but that party might also be projecting to foster more evil. By their fruits you will know them. Satan is a deceiver who seeks to mislead the chosen of God. That is not difficult. All he had to do was pretend to be against abortion. If people had actually read their Bibles, they would realize God's law includes a provision allowing for abortion in the interest of property rights, Numbers 5, and they voted against God's law due to a logical fallacy that appeals to emotion. Story 71. I don't like the two-party system, but no parties would be impractical and difficult to enforce. If I could wave a wand and remake our political system, I'd like a multi-party Congress similar to the parliamentary system many other democracies have adopted, which forces different interests to form coalitions. Ranked choice voting. Taking a page from Australia's book, make voting required and election day a holiday. I think Americans would appreciate some freedom sausages. Oh, and we would absolutely have to overturn the Citizens United ruling. What a detrimental anti-democratic decision. Sadly, anyone who could advance such an agenda is heavily incentivized not to. I wish the United States could actually live up to the ideals we were all taught to believe in as children, but the prospect seems pretty dim at the moment. The pedant in me would like to add, Lincoln wasn't talking about parties in that quote. Story 72. What do you think about the idea of not having any political parties? That is what is already happening, having started when Elon Musk and Donald Trump locked the nation's Congress out of their offices. So currently we are under a coup. Story 73. I prefer a party-less system. People become so wrapped up in ideologies that they do not even realize they are voting against their own beliefs. Story 74. You believe parties are the issue. The real problem is that people do not hold parties accountable. The worst thing to do is remove all parties and focus solely on individuals. An individual has no historical reputation to protect and can easily deceive to get elected. A party does have a reputation to protect and should prevent such behavior. The underlying issue is that Americans often do not pay attention. Story 75. Sounds grand, but a no-party label would still be a party. The third party. With all the challenges a third party faces in every state to get on the ballot and remain viable, it is still a two-party system. Third parties don't have a chance. Not voting at all assures a win for the candidate who should never be allowed anywhere near the White House. Donald Trump, in his ego-driven desire for revenge, intends to damage the United States as much as he can before he dies, with the help of Elon Musk. There are strong indications that Trump and the Republican Party cheated to win the presidency. Voters who did not like Kamala Harris or Trump and didn't vote at all essentially handed the victory to Trump. He has never won the popular vote, and it seems likely he benefited from manipulation, something he is skilled at. How do we get out of this mess? Assuming we have a presidential election in 2028, if you don't like the candidates the two primary parties have nominated, hold your nose and vote for one. Understand that getting all states to allow third-party candidates will take time. Even if the presidency is won, what good is a third party if they don't have a majority in Congress? Personally, I'd like nothing better than to reduce the Democrats and Republicans to minority status in both houses. If the majority of members in both parties wanted to get anything done, they would have to work together with the third party to pass bills to be signed by a third-party president. However, we must remember that third parties are likely to become intolerant as well, and nothing will get done. As the band The Who said in Won't Get Fooled Again, meet the new boss, same as the old boss. Trump got where he is because he fooled the people who supported him. If there is one political opportunist in a party, another will always come along. We need to change the direction of all political parties, but we must be the ones to change first to influence them. The political parties need a severe shakeup, which means removing those who do nothing but collect their pay. The Republicans in Congress are unable to stand up to Trump, while the Democrats lack the numbers to confront him effectively. What you can do is vote out the ineffective members of the party of your choice. They must go. Vote them out as a penalty for indecision or cowardice regarding Trump. Do not vote for another opportunist who wants to ally with Trump. If the candidate is someone who supports Trump, vote against them, no matter how difficult it may be. Send them back to obscurity. The Make America Great Again movement must go. We need politicians with spines who are willing to tell Trump, "You don't like it? Too bad. Behave or face impeachment and removal." Trump needs to be held accountable, along with anyone who has aided him. Story 76. It sounds appealing, but those in power are too entrenched and invested in the status quo to allow for significant change anytime soon. Furthermore, there are individuals who are obsessed with the current leader, and for whom the principles of republicanism no longer hold meaning. This has turned into a cultural conflict, identity politics, and we have spent the last 30 years getting caught up in defining ourselves as being on one side or the other, leaving little room for nuance. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.